Good morning, everybody. It's Lynee with Interview Like an Expert. Sorry for the technical difficulties. They were on my end. So we are a little late to the party, but we are here nonetheless. I am really excited to be with you today, and I'm especially pleased to welcome my special guest, Sharon Knitter. Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, how are you?
So good. So good to have you here. Because I think this is a subject that's of a great interest to a lot of people. So as a career coach, I speak to candidates every day who are searching for work, right? And some feel very confident in going out and finding a new role, others not so much, no matter whether it was pre-COVID or post-COVID. So with the added challenge of COVID pandemic and much higher unemployment rates and competition in the marketplace, I think that many people, and I'm hearing that many people are feeling much more intimidated than ever regarding their job searches. So I thought it would be great to bring on somebody who was laid off during the height of COVID this spring and has successfully navigated to your next professional role, which you start on Monday. So congratulations on that. That's great news.
Yay! Well, and I have to say, cheers to Lynee.
Exactly.
We've known each other forever. And, I respect you so much. So I was so excited for you to ask me to do this because I've been watching all your lives and everything you've done. And I think it's terrific. So, this is the type of thing that people need. So thank you for that.
Wow, you're generous to give us your time. I appreciate it. And so we're going to keep moving because I know you've got some other things on your schedule today. So Sharon and I are friends, as she mentioned, and we're former coworkers. Sharon is a longtime product person. That is her business her focus. She is a product manager, product throughout much of her career. She spent time with me at the Chicago Tribune. She was at cars.com when I was at apartments.com, a sister company. She's also most recently worked at Sears and in Groupon. And now she is about to start her new adventure as director of product for the Togo Group, the leading technology platform for road-based travel and outdoor tourism. Think RVs. So she was one of mobile marketers, also Women to Watch, and she loves to work across all platforms, web, mobile, apps, really all the emerging technology that we all use every single day. So Sharon and I are coming together today so that we can share and you can all learn and hear about what she's done that has allowed her to consistently land new roles, not just recently, but over the past several years. And I think the discussion, by the way, will be especially interesting for those of you who, like me and Sharon, have more than 25 years of experience. What you're going to hear today are some very practical tips and advice that we hope will help those of you who are also engaged in a job search currently. So with that, we're going to dig in, and Sharon and I are going to have our virtual coffee today. So that's what you're kind of tuning in for, coffee time. Here we go. So first of all, Sharon, why don't you share a little bit about your career, especially over the last 10 years or so? Because I know, unfortunately, you've been somebody who's been laid off more than once during this time. And I'm sure a lot of people here in the group would like to hear about how you've dealt with this, because for many people, it's devastating. And if I remember correctly, the first time this happened to you, it was devastating as well.
Absolutely. And, the interesting thing is no one wants to hear longer than 10 years ago. So I'm glad you said that because that's ancient history, right? And it is devastating. But here's what I can say. And I know it sounds a little Pollyannish, but I truly believe change is good. And I'm never more energized. Like, I can't wait till Monday to start my new job because it's like you get to learn so much. So you kind of have to get over it and get over it quickly. It's not personal, especially when they're large layoffs, especially with COVID. I have to tell you, you do not have to explain that to anyone. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not there anymore, laid off during COVID, move on. Right? It has not even been a discussion. So some of it is you got to pull yourself up and say, yeah, I can feel bad for one day. And now, what's my next adventure? And that is what I really think about it. I do not think of this as my next job. I think of it as what's my next adventure. And it changes the dynamic.
Yeah, it changes your perspective. I think that's great. We talked about when we spoke a little bit earlier this week in preparation for today, your attitude and having, a positive attitude. One of the things I focus on in this group is mindset, and the fact that that is important. And your mindset that you bring to any of this is going to infuse everything, including and impact everything, including your results. So I think having that positive attitude is super important.
Absolutely, because think about it.
So I'd love to hear from you.
No, go ahead.
No. Go ahead with the positivity. Sorry,
Yeah.
I forgot there's a delay.
All I was going to think about is, especially when you've been in the market as long as we have, right? Think back to when you're interviewing people. Who are the people you want to hire? Do you want to hire the ones that are sort of mopey and not engaging and scared? No. You want to hire the people who are excited. So you need to do that.
Yep, absolutely. So, something I alluded to at the beginning of in my intro was, this idea of pre-COVID and post-COVID. And this is something that I thought you have some great perspective on. So, what's your perspective on searching for a job pre-COVID and post-COVID?
It's not that different. There's a lot of pieces overall. It's not that different. The good principles that you've learned before are there. I think, for me personally, the most important thing is research. How, and before, and it's true now, is really learning about the business, learning about, what I like to do. It's, I treat it, every interview, as the research that I do is if I already had that position. What would I want to know? Who would I talk to? If I'm interviewing for Wintrust, I'm going to go to that bank manager and go talk to them. What do they think of their online product? I'm going to go and call some RV dealers, which is what I did for Togo, because I don't have that base of knowledge. But if I start tomorrow, I would want it. So that's what I think is important. And I do think with COVID, there are more people out there. So that bar went up, but it's not a bar that you can't attain. You just have to do the work.
I think that is so smart. I think that when we were talking the other day and you were telling me that you went into a bank branch, that you were telling me that you called RV dealers, I said, that's fantastic. I mean, as a product person, it makes so much sense, right? And in the work that I've done previously professionally, I probably couldn't have done quite the same thing. Although I could have probably gone, now that I think of it, I could have gone to somebody who advertises on the medium, right, that I'm interviewing to go sell, right, and find out from them, what do you like? What don't you like? So I love that advice. I love the scrappiness and the smarts on that. And I think it really gives you an edge, to your point, when you go into an interview knowing lots of information and more information than others perhaps who are walking in the door.
And I think what it shows, and I think that's the important thing. So, you don't have that much of a time to make an impression, right? So what it shows is that you are willing to do the work, not for the interview, but that's the kind of passion you will bring once you're in the job, and I think that is key.
I agree completely. I think that when, I'm coaching clients and when I'm in the group talking to everybody, and the things that I really emphasize over and over again, and I love the fact that this is something you practice and that you've had success with and other people can hear that it does garner success. It's being positive, which we just talked about, being engaged, right? Bringing energy to this opportunity and bringing excitement, because that's what people want. That's what employers are looking for. As you said earlier, it's think about, what impression you're making, and are you making a positive impression, and are you positioning yourself as somebody who they're intrigued about and who they want to move forward in the process. So let's talk a little bit about that interview process. And you had some really great things that you talked to me about that you do as part of your interview process. So first of all, talk to me a little bit about how you view the process overall, and as you start and kind of move your way through it, what are some of the techniques and tips and tricks that you'd share with people that you've found to be helpful while you're actually interviewing? So you talked about your prep. Now what happens as you're navigating your way through the interview process?
Sorry, my big dog. So the key thing here is the goal for every interview is to get to the next interview, right? That is the goal, to get to the next interview.
Yep.
So now, if I am, and the one thing I did see with COVID is I think the interview process is a little longer because they're not meeting you in person. So it's a bigger decision, right? Because it's through Zoom, and that gives you a good feeling, but not everything. So you might have, instead of 4 interviews, you might have 6. But for each of those interviews, what I think about is who is it and what is their role, and how does this position help them, and how does me being in this position help them even more. And that, to me, is really the key, is how do we do that piece and really get there. So that, so for example, if I'm meeting with the SVP of marketing, right? That's not product. I'm not going to report to that person. But what I want to ask is, what's their biggest pain point with the product team? Because all of that information then goes into why they want me. And the other thing is, I keep a huge notebook. So when I'm interviewing with somebody from that company, and yes, and it's paper because I'm on Zoom, so I don't want to go back and forth. But so every company and every interview gets its own page. So now I go, oh, well, I interviewed with the CTO. Here's what he said about product. Now I'm interviewing with the marketing person, and I can actually reference back and say, hey, Tom said this. Is that something you agree with or disagree with? And why does that matter? Well, now we're having a conversation. And I'm already a trusted advisor with them. And all of it, that changes the dynamic. And that's what you want to do, right? And this is where all of your pre-research comes in, because the questions that I ask are now different because it's based on other interviews I've done with the company, or I've been on their website and maybe there's an odd flow. Why is that flow there? There might be a good reason, maybe not. Why not ask about it? And then it is, I think, important to try to think of questions that aren't the questions they've heard every time, right? So think about what's important to you, and what's important. Is it the culture? Is it, I asked the CEO of Togo, is how are they dealing with keeping the groups together and connected during a situation like COVID? Right? And I think it just shows, it's almost like if you had the opportunity to talk to a CEO of a company, what do you want to
know? I agree. And I often coach people when we talk about what questions they ask during an interview. And honestly, it doesn't matter what level you're talking to. It could be a hiring manager, or it could be a CEO, to your point. But I think keeping those questions a little bit higher level, a little bit more strategic, right, is really important too. And it allows you to have more of a dialogue versus saying, hey, how many people are on the team, or why is this role open? Really, I encourage people to ask about culture, because I think that is a very elevated kind of question, no matter who you're speaking with. And I think it reflects well on you. And it's something that anybody can answer easily in the organization. And sometimes it'll be telling, right? You may get different answers from different people if you're interviewing with different people. So I think that, to your point, it's questions I recommend typically, let's not get into the nitty gritty and the details of the day-to-day. Although one point you just made was interesting, I think, about saying, hey, I noticed this when I was looking at your product, your online product. I noticed this. Tell me about why this is, right? Because as a product person, this is kind of interesting to me. So I think that you can work it both ways, but it's really being thoughtful about, again, how are you going to demonstrate your really how you differentiate yourself from competitors who are also interviewing, and demonstrate that you've done your homework and that you're being thoughtful when you're having these interview conversations.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I think, another question I ask, and I almost hate to tell it because I feel like nobody asks it, so this is my secret little question, is what does it take to be successful at your company? And it is always met with wow, that's kind of an interesting question, because I'm already thinking, what if I'm already there? If I'm there, I want to be successful. What do all these, so I've just interviewed with 8 different people. Well, that's a great way to start. This is what they've all said of what it takes to be successful.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I think that, yeah, what, like another question I like to, and so I'll share one that I share with so many people, and this is a great place to do so, is tell me what are the top skills and qualities you're looking for in this role. Mm-hmm. Because to your point, you're interviewing with a whole bunch of different people in your case, right? Different levels, different departments. And whether it is, again, your direct hiring manager or whether it's somebody else, what's wonderful about this question is that you can turn around and go, that's great, because I've got A, B, and C in the moment.
Exactly.
So again, you're creating a dialogue and you're able to immediately respond.
Exactly, Lynee, because that's important. It also helps you with your follow-up, right? So in my follow-up letter, emails, thank you very much, blah, blah, blah. But what I really want to say is, I love the fact that this is important to your company, and this is why it's important to me as well. Now, do they all read them? I don't know. But at least I know that I have done everything I can to be successful. And so maybe one reads it, right? But that's what this is about. This is a number, and it is a numbers game. You cannot think, oh, I applied for that job. Great, I'm done. It's like any sales job. This is a sales job. What do you have in the pipeline?
That's right.
Where are you in the pipeline? And how are you going to keep putting things in the pipeline? This is a sales job. And I do look on this as a job when I'm doing this. Now, here's the difference, pre-COVID, post-COVID. Last year, and yes, this has happened to me twice in 2 years. So yeah, last year when I did it, I was 24/7, didn't take a break, and networked. And it is about networking, but it's also about applying and thoughtfully applying. This year, there's not as much to do. So I still carved out 2 to 3 hours in the morning, and then I went and did something else. There was no reason to just sit there and fret. But it also means I have that much longer to do research when I have when I get that interview. It's not that easy to get an interview. So even with the HR recruiter that's internal, I do a lot of research, because they're my advance man. A lot of people go, well, it's not even the hiring manager. I'll just, tell them about my experience and be done. Absolutely not. Can you make them your advocate within the company? And that's what you're trying to do.
That's right. You're right. It is a sales job, and a lot of people don't like to hear that because they think I'm not a salesperson, and you're not a salesperson either. You're a product person, but you understand that when you're interviewing, you are selling a product and you're selling you. That's what you're selling to these companies, and so you have to be prepared and be ready. I often, liken it to studying for an exam, right? So to your point, once you get that interview, you need to do your research like you've done. You need to go on their website. You've gone above and beyond, and you're even calling people that they work with based on your understanding of the organization to just get some additional perspective on this business. And I think that's particularly creative. But yeah, I think that you don't want to minimize the importance of any interview these days. You're right, it is harder to get. There are, I mean, like your point about, taking less time, I know you had said the other day, it's because there's less opportunities being posted, right? So that's the reality. But you're right, making them count, applying for the jobs that are in your wheelhouse and making it count when you get the interview, very important. And then I'll go back to one other thing I tell people all the time. So I'm going to keep repeating it because repetition helps people understand. And that's applying is just the first step, right? Applying, then networking, then preparing for interviews. Applying is the first step. It's not the only step to you getting that next job.
Oh, 100%. So, I would see a job that I thought was interesting. It's at a company, right? I first look through all my contacts in LinkedIn. Do I know anybody, first or second? Let's say third is pretty far. So first or second degree, do I know them? Now I'm going to reach out. Or here's the other thing. Wow, well, they work with the same company that Lene worked at. So now I'm going to call Lene. And because, one, I'm going to get more information, right? So is it a good fit? Is it not a good fit? Could I maybe just talk to that person, even if they have nothing to do with that hiring situation, but could I talk to them and understand what's important to the company? So the application and finding that job is just one thing. Now that said, I have found my last 3 jobs through listings on job boards. It's not some secret network, right? Now, I know other people find them through their network, but I've always used my network to secure the job. Because ultimately, there has to be there. And so then it is about how do I position myself the best for that job.
I love that. And and listen, the truth, I mean, I can attest to the fact that you work your network because I know every time that you found yourself in a layoff situation, I'm one of the people that you call and talk to, whether it's about, what strategy to use, whether it's about, do you have a contact here? And you are really good about that. And it's so smart because people oftentimes don't reach out to people, even if, maybe that person, like in my case, I don't have a direct connection to your product world, but I am a resource for something else, right? So it's leveraging all of those resources and asking for help and asking for guidance where you can. And I think it also helps build up your confidence and build up your feelings of positivity when you know there are people helping you, supporting you, trying to help you navigate this process as well. So you're a very capable person on your own, but of course we're all much more, we're all stronger and more effective when we ask for help and when we get help from others. And people are always willing to help others in these situations, particularly now when things are really quite different than they've been in many, many years.
And the other thing is, I think we have to get over the fact that you feel ashamed because you lost your job. Because it's not personal. This is business. And so it's much more important to get it out there that you're looking for a job. That's an important thing. And so you have to sort of leave your ego at the door and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. That's great.
That's right. And I think as you go through this process multiple times, and we talked about this the other day, and I'm just going to mention the fact that I had said to you, I think that the reason you're having more success is because you've had more practice. I know it's not been by choice over the last several years, but you've had more practice doing this. And so you are more practiced in the process. and you feel more confident in what it takes. And I think there's so many people who, unlike you, unlike me, prior to the job I'm in now, right? I had 5 different jobs in 7 years. So I had been interviewing consistently and I really knew what I was doing. But there are plenty of people who get laid off after several years in the same job, and they haven't interviewed in several years and they really feel overwhelmed because things have changed so much. So I think this is so helpful for people to understand, at least get a perspective from somebody. In the case of you, somebody who's actually done this and done it several times, practice does help. So if you're not practicing on your own, practicing with a coach, if you can, work with somebody, finding some free resources, through a church or community group, whatever you can do, but getting some practice and getting more comfortable with this process and what is required is so important. So one question I want to ask you that I thought we hit upon the other day too, as we get ready to wrap up here, is about compensation. Because, I talk to people a lot about how they address compensation in interviews. And I know that, obviously we're not going to talk about specifics of your compensation, but I think I thought it was really helpful what you told me about how you address this when you're asked about it and how you navigate that question, because people ask it all the time. So I'd love to hear you share some of that information with the group.
So I also try to stay very realistic, right? Nobody loves the idea of going back in a salary, but realistically, if you go back $2,000, $5,000, I mean, you're really talking maybe a dinner out a year when it all comes down to it. It's not that much. So again, this is an ego thing that I think it's a false ego. And I'm not saying I want to go work and not be fairly compensated, because I don't. But I also don't want to throw out a number that I think is going to surprise somebody or scare them away. Because again, what is my goal? Is to get to the next level. So I always ask when they say, what kind of compensation are you looking for? I always try to turn the question around and say that it's not my most important or only criteria. Job fit is very important. Can you tell me what the range of the position is? And I can let you know if I can fit within that range. And it's a very, I think, very fair way, because, at the end of the day, is it, this number or this number, or can I work within the range that they are going to go? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and they say, yeah, but no, I'm not going to tell you that, so what is the range? And then you can always say, if they're not going to push you, hey, you know what, sort of what the market average is. For a product director in Chicago, what's the market average? And I'm pretty much right at there. And so I try those 2 ways. And again, if then it's like, no, but I need to know exactly, then I give them a number. But making something is better than making nothing. So are you really going to, if it's a job and you're going to want to get up in the morning and go to that job, is $3,000 that important? So that's where I think it needs to be realistic. And, I do think the job market is going to be a very tough place.
I agree. Sorry, your Wi-Fi is a little spotty, I think. So I just want to kind of reiterate what you were talking about. Like, if you are pressed to give a number, that you will give a range, or you'll say this is the market average for this role. So do your homework and try and find that out. Again, what you find online isn't always 100% true. There are lots of large ranges for different jobs. I was working with a client yesterday, and we saw a number of different ranges for the title of role that he was applying for, depending on the website, the job site that you pulled that data from. So knowing your market rate and knowing if it's high or low is certainly helpful. Now, to your point, taking going backwards $2,000 or $3,000 a year is not a lot, but I just spoke to a woman yesterday who's gone back 50%. right? She took a job at a company and she went back 50%. And now they're being told at this new company that they're going to take further cuts. So she's like, I can't stay here. And I think that she's right. And I think that she has an opportunity to, with her credentials, move to a company where she will be better compensated. Will it be where she was before? Maybe not. Luckily, she's in a sales role. So sometimes that does allow you to have better compensation. But at the end of the day, you do need to be smart and flexible. And I think to your point, especially Sharon, you need to recognize that things are different now and companies are laying off mass people. I just heard about LinkedIn yesterday engaging in a mass layoff.
Yeah.
They're impacted because people aren't posting jobs, and that's a big part of their income. So there are going to be some adjustments, I expect, as well as layoffs, right, in terms of how people are compensated. So I thank you for addressing that question. People always want to know, again, how people navigate that, because it's a very delicate thing. And some people go in very strong, and some people are very just flustered when they talk about it. So preparing how you're going to address that is important. So with that, I want to thank you so much. I know that we need to wrap up today because you've got some other things going on. I appreciate all of your time. I'm sure everybody here has appreciated your wisdom that you've shared, and I wish you tons of good luck in your new job starting Monday.
All right. Well, thank you, Lynee. This was great fun. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, you have a great rest of your day, and good luck to you. Thanks. Bye-bye.